Yoo-hoo!
Starfox is an interesting series, one that doesn't appear too often in the lineup of upcoming games. Over the past 20 plus years, and yes, it actually has been that long, only a little over 5 Starfox games have been released. In fact, we haven't seen a brand new title in the series in roughly 10 years, and even longer if you don't count the handheld game Starfox Command. So why is this series so beloved by fans? I personally think that it's because it's just so darn fun. And sure, it's true that only a couple games in the series have actually shaken the original gameplay, but you know, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. Originally though, it wasn't meant to be that way. In fact, the lost SNES sequel to the original Starfox would have radically shifted the gameplay. And pretty much every Starfox title from then on has borrowed some ideas from this cancelled game, including the new Starfox Zero, Starfox Command, and even Super Mario 64. So on this episode of Beta64, I'm going to discuss the beta of Starfox 2. Almost immediately after the successful release of Starfox for the SNES in 1993, a game entitled Starfox 2 began development by Argonaut Games. Some actually say that the sequel's creation began on February 16, 1993, 5 days before the first title's release in Japan. But even if that is true, Starfox 2 wasn't revealed to the public until January of 1994, when it was stated that the game would be the first one to use the new Super FX 2 chip. And because Nintendo's new system, the Ultra 64, was delayed, they decided to push the Virtual Boy and the Super FX games for the SNES even more, though eventually all of them got cancelled. But let's get back to that later. At the Winter Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, in January of 1995, Nintendo's Starfox 2 was highly praised by the attendees and was always being played at the demo stations. In fact, the game was so popular that a man attempted to steal a demo of the game, but he was never able to, as he was arrested before he could make off with the cartridge. Also at CES 1995, a Starfox tech demo for the Virtual Boy was shown among various other upcoming Virtual Boy games to attendees in a dark room where they were given 3D glasses to view the footage. Sadly though, this tech demo never made it into a full game, and just like the amazing looking Mario platformer, many of these demos were lost to the sands of time. And speaking of time, at the show, Starfox 2 was set for a summer 1995 release, but of course that never came to be. In fact, the game wasn't even shown at E3 1995, which, fun fact, was the first ever E3 Expo. Instead, Nintendo showed off the final Ultra 64 hardware, along with Donkey Kong Country 2 and again, the Virtual Boy. In September, an issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly stated that Starfox 2 had been cancelled. But to dismiss that, Nintendo Power wrote in their latest issue that the rumors of the demise of Starfox 2 have been greatly exaggerated. In addition to that, they also mentioned that the game was still being worked on, and that the release date would likely be during the first half of 1996. And that was it. Nintendo never mentioned the game again, and we only knew of its cancellation when Nintendo showed off Starfox 64. From various sources, it appears that the game was finished summer of 1995, which actually happens to be the first release date that they announced. Of all the factors that played a role in the cancellation, the biggest was the Nintendo 64. But why, you may ask? The Nintendo 64 wasn't released until June of 1996 in Japan, over a year after Starfox 2 was planned to hit shelves. And while that is true, you have to keep in mind that the Nintendo 64 was planned to be released much earlier than it actually did. According to Dylan Cuthbert, who is the lead programmer of Starfox 2, Miyamoto-san decided he wanted to have a clean break between 3D games on the SNES and 3D games on the new superior Nintendo 64. He even admits that if Starfox 2 had released, it would have been over a year and a half before the Nintendo 64 would have been sold. But of course, as he says, hindsight is always 20/20. Also, he stated that while Starfox 64 incorporated a lot of newer ideas created in Starfox 2, it didn't take the genre a full step forward, since Starfox 2 was really a different direction of gameplay. But you're likely wondering what this different direction of gameplay is. So let's start from the beginning of the game. Starfox 2's story begins after the original Starfox, and now Andros returns to the Lilat system to launch an all-out attack against Corneria, with fleets of battleships and hidden bases shooting interplanetary ballistic missiles. So who do you call when this kind of trouble happens? Why, the Starfox team, of course. In order to defend Corneria, the team must destroy planetary bases, fight giant bosses, and even fight against the Star Wolf team, leading to a final battle with Andross. Featuring 6 playable characters each with their own stats, Starfox 2 allowed the user to choose their character and play in a semi-real-time world, instead of the mostly linear gameplay of the first Starfox. The player can fly 2 R-Wings, and when the ships come into contact with bases, enemies, or missiles, you switch into action mode, which controls similarly to the original Starfox. After completing or returning from a battle, the player returns to the map and the process begins again. During the game, the enemies only move when you move on the map, but will also continue to pursue the planet while you're in action mode, so you better make your battles quick. The point of the game is to destroy the enemy forces while still protecting Corneria, by intercepting missiles and fighting enemy fighters before they reach the planet. You must also destroy enemy battleships and bases to keep forces from being deployed again. Thankfully, General Pepper has a satellite to help you in your mission, but you must also keep this out of enemy hands, because if they get to it, they can use it to fire on Corneria itself. I mean, I have to say, it's quite an incredible game. Additionally, there was also a 2-player duel mode, which is especially impressive for the time it was made. But even though Starfox 2 was cancelled, Nintendo didn't just leave all of these amazing ideas behind. Many aspects of the game made it into future titles, ones that weren't even Starfox related. First off, the 3D environment of the original Starfox and likely Starfox 2 was used to help the development of Super Mario 64. Also, Miyamoto stated that roughly 30% of Starfox 64 came from Starfox 2, like Star Wolf, all range mode, and tank levels. Much later, Star Fox Command for the Nintendo DS used strategic elements from Star Fox 2's gameplay. And more recently, the game's Walker mode managed to find its way into Star Fox Zero for the Wii U. I mean, just look at this comparison. They're almost identical. And that's it. Or so we thought. Star Fox 2 might have been cancelled, but that didn't mean that people wouldn't search for it. And they found it. In fact, they found it twice. The first build released to the public was an early internal alpha version of the game that was built while it was very early in development, likely discovered between May and September of 1999. The ROM image was found within an archive, which also contained the game's source code with it. But while this is cool, it's not really in much of a playable state. In fact, the build shown at 1995 Winter CES was way more developed than this build. So we still didn't really get to play Star Fox. Until at last in August of 2002, when Star Fox 2's final beta was discovered. For those who don't know, final beta basically means pretty much everything is in the game and working, but it's not completely cleaned up for release, which is shown by the fact that the frames per second and sprite counter are still enabled, and various test modes are still selectable too. But where did they find this build? It turns out that a developer of Star Fox 2 deliberately leaked an assembled binary of the game so it could be emulated. But it still wasn't in SNES ROM format, so it took some time before it would even play. But eventually, thanks to the hard work of several individuals, Star Fox 2 is now playable. According to our knowledge, there are 5 main builds of the game. First off, the early alpha version was the one that came with the source code of the game. The second version is a build for Nintendo Power's exclusive preview, and next is the 1995 Winter CES version. And don't forget the final beta that was leaked. But what about that 5th build? Well, according to a 2015 Nintendo Life interview with Dylan Cuthbert, he actually owns the final build of Star Fox 2 that has already been reviewed and debugged ready for release. He said that he received this build while working on Star Fox Command, and states that there are many elements in this build that aren't in any of the prototype versions that are available today. When asked if this build would ever make its way to Virtual Console, he said it was unlikely due to legal concerns with Argonaut Games. Now, of course, there is always the fan translation of the game that does a very good job at making it seem like the final game. In fact, many bootleg cartridges floating around use this translation, but don't be fooled. This translation and those carts are not the final game. We don't have access to that, as of now. Maybe in the future, I don't know, crazier things have happened. Now, in order to look at the differences between these builds, I'm going to go through each one and compare them to the final beta. Ready?
Good luck.
First up, the early alpha. This build contains many elements from the final beta, but quite a few of them are still buggy and even crash the game. To start, we'll talk about the R-Wing, which has a remove transformation that turns the ship into a hovercraft. Also, the fire button in this version is the same as the original Star Fox, but the final beta changed the fire button from Y to B. When boosting and braking, this build has a meter that's not in the final beta, which will cause your ship to overheat if you use either of these functions for too long. Many ground levels also have a compass showing the direction you're facing, and while flying in space, the early alpha version puts people into third-person mode, while the final puts you into first-person mode and uses third-person for ground battles. There are 5 options in the early alpha: mission, battle, test, training, and config. In the final beta, battle was replaced with record, so you may be asking what battle was. Well, it just so happens to be a 2-player battle mode that was removed from the final beta. In this mode, you can choose between 5 stages, 2 ground, 2 space, and 1 marine. And you can choose between 6 characters: Fox, Falco, Peppy, Slippy, what appears to be Andros, and another Fox character, who looks to be a female. Now, who is this unnamed Fox character? Well, from mission mode, you can choose a character by their name. The options are Fox, Falco, Peppy, Slippy, Sadu, and Lady. So is this new character Sadu or Lady? Well, when you think about it, it's quite obviously Lady, because in Japanese, Sadu means monkey, and this unnamed character is obviously a fox. While this character is likely Lady, she does bear a stunning resemblance to Farrah Phoenix from the Starfox comic. One last thing, given that Sadu means monkey, could that mean that this Andros-like character isn't actually Andros? Could it instead be a lookalike member of the Starfox team named Sadu? In any case, Lady and Sadu were changed to Miu and Faye in the final beta, with Miu being a lynx and Faye being a dog. The next mode is Test, which brings you to 5 different levels that are empty except for rings. You can also choose one of the developer names, perhaps to let them know who was testing the stage, and whether to play 1 or 2 player mode. Training brings the player to a screen to choose mode Type or Train. Type was likely meant to explain the gameplay mechanics, and Train places the player in a ground level where it explains controls. Lastly, Config allows the user to change between stereo and mono sound, and includes a semi-working sound tester. Now let's move on to the Nintendo Power exclusive build. Firstly, a title screen is now present, which shows 2 in Roman numerals, while the final beta uses typical Arabic characters. The character portraits are also facing a different direction in the final beta, and Andros and General Pepper's portraits were removed as well. The 2 new characters have also been changed from what we believe to be a monkey and a fox to a goat character and the final Miu. Other than that and a lot of polish, the only real difference we can see with the limited amount of screenshots is the map screen, which is a lot plainer and has the planets on the outside instead of spread around. Next up is the CES build. Due to the incredible popularity of Star Fox 2 at the show, many magazines had a preview of the game, which includes many screenshots of its gameplay. From these, we can see exactly what changed between this build and the final beta, like the title screen for instance. You can see that there's no longer Roman numerals for 2. In fact, compared to the final beta, both the logo and background look pretty much the same. The only real difference are the character portraits, which are still facing a different direction. But now a goat character has been replaced with Faye, the final character. One other thing to note about this build is that everything is in English, while all the other builds that have leaked have been in Japanese. Another thing, the intro mission is still quite different than the final beta, especially Andros. And also the map is still unlike the final beta, as it's missing some planets and the enemy icons look quite different. The asteroid belt is in a different location too. Not only that, the targets you aim for in planet-based levels were changed between the 2 versions. Now, despite the fact that we don't have the final version of the game, there's still 1 unused level in the final beta. By going into test and selecting Venom on planet step 6, you'll be placed in a neighborhood, complete with houses, palm trees, and swimming pools. There isn't much to do in this level though. Supposedly, there's 9 targets, but there are no switches, bosses, or a base to enter, so it's unbeatable. So that's the beta of Star Fox 2. Truly, it's an incredible shame that this game wasn't released. This is the first prototype game that I've actually sat down and beat multiple times just for fun. The saddest part for me is that while a full version of this game exists, we're unlikely to ever be able to play it. But then again, we never thought Donkey Kong 64 would be released on Virtual Console, or that the scrap English translation of Mother would ever make it to us. But they did, so don't think that Star Fox 2's release would be impossible, just improbable. So this has been Beta64 with the Star Fox 2 beta. Thanks for watching. You know, talking about Nintendo Power reminded me of the good old days. When I was younger, I didn't have the money to get a Nintendo Power subscription, so every month I would head to my library, and they would always have the latest issue. I would read them for hours. The articles, reviews, comics, and previews all just bring back some happy memories. But if you're in the know, you'll know that Nintendo Power closed their doors in 2012, and what a sad day that was. But by pure chance, while I was at a Best Buy event, I met a guy named Lucas, who brought a crew together to make a magazine called Nintendo Force, the spiritual successor to Nintendo Power. They've got the letter section, previews, reviews, new and retro game articles, and even interviews with people like Chris Seaver, creator of Conker's Bad Fur Day. And guess what? I was interviewed for issue 18. Beta64 is in a magazine. I mean, wow. Wow. So friends, if you want to check it out, you can purchase an issue or a bundle of them at nintendoforcemagazine.com/shop. It's only $2.99 for a digital copy or less, and you can also get a printed copy shipped anywhere in the world. But seriously, thank you so much for watching these videos. I never thought I'd ever be interviewed for a magazine. Childhood dream right here.